There comes a feeling every so often while playing video games of wanting to experience something different, whether it's story, music, gameplay, or maybe just something that you haven't experienced before. We all have a comfort zone of what we like, but it can be hard to journey outside of that. I've played many games over my years, from platformers, RPGs, beat 'em ups, visual novels, you name it, and from that I've made many memories and experiences that I love to talk about. Throughout my 20 plus years of gaming, it can be hard to find something that gives me a feeling of renewed energy as to why I enjoy this medium so much. I try as much as I can to see what sticks, and thanks to that, when something stands out to me, I tend to enjoy it a lot more. 2021 so far at the time of this video has been alright, but nothing too amazing, until recently. I want to discuss a game that stood out to me, and helped spark the idea for this video, and that is Nier.
As I said earlier, the game I want to look at today is Nier. While this is a remake of the original game, I wanted to take a look at it to see if it was worth the hype I'd heard about over the years. Fair warning, I will be showing some spoiler stuff in here, but not everything to where if you wanted to play the game for yourself, I think you can still have a good time.
I'll be looking at the PS4 version playing off my PS5, but this game is also available on Xbox and PC. I want to warn you though that on PC I have heard of some frame rate issues depending on the graphics card. I personally didn't run into any problems when I tried it out for about an hour for the video, but if that is your platform of choice, I would recommend looking into it a bit more.
Before we jump right in, I want to go over my personal history with the franchise as a whole.
Nier is a series that launched back in 2010, and I never heard of it until quite a few years later, around the time Automata was getting ready to release. It was E3 2015 when I saw this weird man with a moon on his head making his way onto the internet. It was later that I learned that this was Yoko Taro, a video game director and scenario writer that had a few games under his belt at the time. However, most have been met with mixed results, starting with his directional debut with Drakengard on the PS2, that had somewhat of a cult following. After some friends in my circle kept telling me how amazing Automata was, with some even stating that it was their game of the year, I eventually played through Automata after getting caught up with the series from the beginning of Drakengard 1 by watching clips on YouTube, and walked away loving it. By the way, I highly suggest giving their videos a watch if you want to see someone who clearly loves this franchise and goes into way more depth about the themes and worlds of this franchise. It also helped that Final Fantasy XIV, a game I've played for a few years now, included references to both Automata and the original Nier, with some Drakengard thrown in there as well, in the Shadowbringers Alliance raid Yorha Dark Apocalypse that helps cement my love for Automata. The reason I bring this up is because by the time I had finally gotten a chance to play Nier, Replicant had already been announced. I really wanted to give the original or the remake a shot thanks to Automata introducing me to the series, but there was one big issue, and that was I already spoiled the story for myself. Spoilers are always a mixed bag. There are some people who don't want anything spoiled at all, and there are those that don't mind depending on the context or don't care at all. There are times where spoilers have helped me enjoy a story more thanks to having a better understanding of plot details that I might have missed otherwise. With Nier, this was a yes and no situation for me. Like other Yoko Taro games before it, Nier requires multiple playthroughs to see the whole story. The first playthrough will get you familiar with the world and characters, while subsequent playthroughs will add more context or are a continuation of the overall plot until the end. Nier will take roughly around 4 playthroughs to see the complete story, or at a minimum 3 if you have pre-existing knowledge of where to save in specific points in the story as you complete each corresponding ending. While there was some stuff I didn't know, a lot of the big reveals were already told or shown to me, so now it's up to the rest of the game to really bring up my enjoyment overall.
So is the hype worth it for Nier? Let's take a look and find out.
The story begins with a desolate looking city in what appears to be winter. We see 2 siblings, the main character and his sister Yona, trying their best to survive against the odds when these strange and bizarre creatures start appearing out of nowhere. The main character is named whatever you call them when starting the game, although most people call him Nier as the titular character and what I'll be referring to him as from now on. I also want to point out that in the original game, you played as a father instead of a brother because when the first game was released, two versions of Nier were developed in Japan, Nier Replicant and Nier Gestalt. In the West, we got Papa Daddy Nier because when the decision was made to bring over Nier, they decided to use his design as they thought people in the West would like it more. I'm fine with either as long as the character is good. It just depends on whether you want a sibling relationship or a parent. In this remake, you'll play as the older brother. We deal with the creatures thanks to this magic book and get a taste of some of the power you'll get through the journey as you continue through the story. It then seems that Yona is succumbing to some kind of disease and loses consciousness. The scene ends with Nier screaming for help from anyone that can hear him as he desperately holds Yona in his arms.
We need help. Please, somebody, we need help! Help us!
Fast forward over 1,000 years in the future, and things seem to be pretty well. Yona is still sick but looks happier, with Nier looking after her. While researching her disease, we find out that Yona has disappeared and go looking for her. After tracking her down to the lost shrine, Nier travels to the roof and finds her captured. After getting some help from a talking book, Grimoire Weiss, he's able to save her. It's later revealed the disease that Yona is suffering from is called the Black Scroll, and if a cure isn't found, she will die. With hope that by working with Weiss, they can find a cure, Nier sets out on his journey. This is where the game really starts. You'll travel the world and meet interesting characters and do some side questing, upgrade weapons, fight some monsters, typical RPG stuff. I know it seems like I'm really glossing over what's considered to be one of the highlights of the game, but even if I spoil some stuff, I think it's best to really experience the full story on your own. This video is meant to go over my personal enjoyment of the game and what I thought of it. The story is worth going through. I can honestly say it lived up to my expectations and then some. The problems that I stated earlier where I already knew the story going in, some of the more big plot twists and reveals that happened over the course of the game didn't leave that much of an impact on me. Don't get me wrong, some of the moments getting to see them in action were really cool, but nothing that made me emotional or react with cheer. I feel with Nier, that's one thing that can make a big difference in someone's overall enjoyment. Rather than describing the plot, I'd rather you get to experience it and draw your own conclusions. Like with other Yoko Taro games, you'll do more than one playthrough that helps expand the overall story, but you'll only go through part 1 once. What I mean is that the story has a time skip where you'll go through old and new areas to see how they've changed, and repeat playthroughs you'll only go through part 2. Time skips are one of my favorite tropes because it helps make the connection that you're seeing the character grow, although it doesn't always look cool in real life.
Yo, what the fuck?
Seeing the story more expanded I felt was a good reward for going through the game again and again, and did lead to me seeing new cutscenes I'd never seen before, but nothing too amazing. It didn't help that by playthrough 3, I counted probably only 4 new cutscenes, not counting some of the stuff with Episode Mermaid, which I'll go into a bit later, that felt like they could have been included in playthrough 2, and nothing of value would have been lost. There was one new thing I did get to experience with this remake, and that was Ending E. In case you didn't know, Ending E was a short story included in Grimoire Nier, a collection of short stories that was only available in Japan, and could be thought of as a lost ending that the original game never got. This new ending made it the perfect cap to the game overall, and in my honest opinion, is some of the best story in the game. I do have one major issue with this though. To my knowledge, there is nothing in the game that tells you that they have added this new ending. Even when you get Ending D, where all your save data is wiped, like in the original game, it just says, "Thank you for playing." If it wasn't for resources on the internet, I feel this ending could have been missed, and how you unlock it isn't made exactly clear. I get that Yoko Taro games usually have some hidden things like this, but in my experience, it was only bonus content. When you have plot tied behind it as well, that's when I have an issue with this method of storytelling. Compared to Automata, I think the story overall is slightly better, and there are some outside resources like short stories, interviews with Taro, etc. that help expand the story a bit more if you're into that sort of thing. It didn't feel as necessary as I felt it did in Automata, like with the stage plays and short stories to help expand the characters more and understand their personalities better. Really, I think it just comes down to what themes you like and how you like to piece the story together, whether through what's told to to you in-game, or having more resources to flesh out a narrative and characters and how you view them. From my perspective, these games want you to feel emotions, and it does a fantastic job at creating likable characters and interactions that go really far to make them feel like real people. Also, big shoutouts to the voice cast. In this remake, every NPC in the game has been given a voice. While not all of them are standouts,
I want to find Mom!
Is everything okay?
the stars of the show being Liam O'Brien and Laura Bailey, the voices of Kaine and Grimoire Weiss. Having grown up hearing these two in similar sounding roles, it made me really happy to hear them again. I just really like to hear these two in a video game because they're really good.
Kaine?
Is that it?
Hmm?
Are you finished yet?
Don't speak to your grandma like...
You're going to stop talking now. And then I'm going to slowly walk over to you, cram my hand inside your goddamn bitch-ass chest, and pull out your fucking heart!
For the love of all that is holy, would you please stop pounding me?
The rest of the main cast also does a solid job. Julie Ann Taylor, the voice of Emile, brings to life a young kid that wants to do the right thing and help his friends.
We're always going to be together, Kaine. If you transform again, we'll just stop it again. As many times as it takes. I don't care how tough it is. We're gonna get you back. I like sleeping outside because I'm with you, Kaine. I'm able to ignore my appearance and keep going because of you. I'm weak, and I'm sad, and I'm lonely. But you make me strong. You're my friend, and I need you. So don't you dare leave me!
All right. Stop crying.
This is also the only game I can think of where a time skip happens and we get to hear two actors take on the role of a main character. Zach Aguilar and Ray Chase do such a good job as Nier that it feels like he grows from a young adventurous teenager into a refined young man.
People say the world is dying. Populations continue to fall, while plague and disease run rampant. If that wasn't enough, monsters called Shades now roam the land as well, threatening our very lives. But I can't let any of that distract me.
This world is winding down. Between the Shades and the Black Scrawl, there won't be anyone left soon. My life now, and my purpose, is hunting Shades.
When it comes to action RPGs, Replicant feels right at home. The controls in combat felt very responsive and fun to just move around. Combat isn't anything too technical, but it felt good to try the 3 weapon types and learn the best ways to use them. I ended up sticking with the spear the most thanks to it feeling faster than a 2-handed weapon, and it did more damage than a 1-handed weapon. There were times that combat felt like it was a little too hectic because either enemies had so much armor, or they would hit like a truck, and I would just have to attack at range instead. Range was probably the only thing combat-wise I'm kinda mixed on. You'll use sealed verses that you'll get throughout the game to use magic, and while some of the spells look cool, I ended up only using Dark Lance and Dark Arm as my side attacks, while Dark Blast was never changed. They were great for dealing quick and easy damage and helped stagger enemies where I could then do a finishing blow. With all the weapons and spells that you collect over the game, I think it would have been cool if you equipped certain weapons with your magic attacks and you would get some kind of awesome looking move instead of just normal combos. As for the weapons themselves, I'm not sure if it's just me, but I really didn't notice that much of a difference depending on the weight. It might have made combat feel slower, but either I just missed it, or the difference is so minute that it doesn't matter which weapon you use. Usually, I ended up just sticking with whatever did the most damage after upgrading weapons at the junk heap and adding words to a weapon that help add benefits that can range from doing more damage or helping restore magic faster. Most of the enemies you'll face across the game are Shades, and they come in different shapes and sizes. While Shades don't have a ton of variety, I do appreciate their look. Nier has this ability to take faceless enemies and make them look unsettling. It also helped convey the ambiguity of what you were fighting, which I think helps tie into the overall story and themes that Nier likes to tackle when it comes to what is human and what isn't. When it comes to bosses though, I'm kinda mixed. There are some that look great and the boss fight itself is fun, but then there are others that just felt meh or bleh, because either the design felt overly done or just nothing to really write home about, which is a shame because this is also where the music ramps up and really comes into its own. The best boss in the game, though, has to go to Louise from the new episode Mermaid. The build up to the fight I thought was done extremely well, and the fight overall, while simple mechanically, had great moments and felt like a short story made into a DLC chapter. Seeing it more fleshed out over the multiple playthroughs was nice and really made you feel for these side characters. I do wish you had the option to skip it if you wanted to, because it does feel like it was added as forced content and doesn't mean anything in the overall story. I don't have a clever way to segue into this, but I want to take a minute to really talk about the soundtrack. Nier has this certain sound to it that when you hear it, you know it's Nier music. Keiichi Okabe had been composing music for video games and anime over the years, but the Nier series was the first time I had heard his work. Most of the soundtrack is very distinct, with beautiful vocals coming from Emmy Evans, singing in a made-up language that really helps bring out the emotions it's trying to express when it's played throughout the story. This is also one of the very few OSTs that I've heard in a while that when a certain character's theme plays, it is the character. Let me explain. There are songs in games that when you hear them, you remember a character and everything about them. Their struggles, their achievements, your time with them. Kaine and Emil's themes to me are the highlight of the soundtrack. I said that earlier, Nier wants you to feel emotions with its story and characters, and these themes incorporate this idea perfectly. If I had one issue with the OST overall, it would be some of the music sounds too repetitive or just generic fantasy music. The song that plays in the Lost Shrine is probably my least favorite song in the game. It feels like it's looping every 30 seconds in an area that already has some of the most generic puzzles in the game. Let's just say I wasn't a fan. Overall, I'd say about 70% of the OST is very good and is something I highly recommend listening to, while the remaining 30% feels like it lacks anything to make it special or stand out. Unfortunately, this lack of meaning also bleeds into the side quests. Usually, I'm all for completing as many side quests as I can come across the moment I see they're available. It's that sense of completion kicking in, and I gotta do everything! I started to notice though that other than gold, I didn't feel like I was getting much out of them. Maybe the occasional weapon while I was unlocking endings C and D, but that's it. The side quests don't really amount to much of anything other than the standard fetch quest and the occasional defeat this enemy. There were some standouts like the one with the lady in the lighthouse and the devil and Popola side quest, but that's about it. They don't even give you experience to level up. Maybe there was more I missed that had really good dialogue, but by the time I reached part 2, I stopped caring and only did the story. Which is a shame because the world is interesting, I want to get to know it better, but the quests were such a slog that I didn't feel it was worth it. There was one piece of side content though I found to be the best in the game. On the second playthrough, you can interact with a journal that takes you through a series of combat challenges. None of them are that complex or hard, but the smile on my face when I saw Papa Nier going into this mode made me very excited to play it. I have this weird nostalgia for this character even though I never played the original Nier, and hearing the original voice actor Jameson Pierce doing lines makes me really hope that we get some kind of update or DLC where we get to play as him in the main story. Just a nice way to make this the default package of the game, you know? Speaking of this being a remake, compared to other remakes that have come out recently, I think this is one of the better ones. It's not without its problems, but throughout my playthrough, I didn't run into any glitches or get stuck or had to reset, which I appreciate. There was the occasional level I wasn't a fan of, particularly the Desert Temple, and especially the Forest Visual Novel segment. The game would have really benefited though with some more quality of life upgrades to really help the player. For example, when doing multiple playthroughs, a fast travel option would have been a very nice feature to help negate backtracking that starts to rear its ugly head in the second half of the game. The game even has some banter about it.
You ever wish you could just warp back to the client after you get their stuff?
Whoa.
Yeah, it's apparently a kind of magic that can zap you to faraway places in an instant.
Ah, that one. Well, I would stay away from such devilry were I you, lad.
How come?
Because all of the sages who attempted said spell were reduced to mincemeat when they struck obstacles in their path.
Wow. Doesn't seem...
An excellent choice.
Just because you joke about it doesn't mean I'm not going to ignore the issue. There is a boat later on you can unlock, but that's not exactly the solution I'm talking about. Another thing would be a timer for gardening. At first, I didn't get much use out of it, but when I found out that by harvesting wheat I could get a really good profit, I made sure to take advantage of it. It would be very helpful if the game had a timer that told you how long it would take for your crops to grow, because they grow in real Earth time. The game even sells you a speedy fertilizer that helps speed up the process, but what good is it if it doesn't tell you how much time it's cutting it down by? Also, for as many times as you have to pull up the map, it would have been very helpful to have a custom waymark that you could set. You've already got a mini-map in the bottom right of the screen that will mark where your objective is, so I don't see why they couldn't add it to help when farming items for side quests or where certain enemies may spawn. These are just some of the small changes that I think could go a long way to help benefit the average player's experience, rather than just having to look the stuff up online. The original game may not have been able to fit these in, maybe due to budget or time, but this is the perfect opportunity to add them. Maybe in a future update they could add these features, because it would really help with some of the tedium that makes it feel like it's bogging the rest of the game down.
And that about covers it for Nier Replicant, a remake of a game that only had a small cult following at the time, but now it has a chance to reach a wider audience. But can I recommend it?
I did have a fun time, I can't deny that, and the story was worth going through even after knowing most of the big plot details. The biggest issue I think the game has going against it is tedium. The multiple playthroughs, while a cool concept for a game that isn't too long, feels redundant after the second playthrough, and it can take up to 4 if you don't take advantage of saving multiple times at the end of the game to cut it down to 3. While it helps that you keep your weapons in level, it doesn't change the fact that you're fighting the same bosses, solving the same puzzles, and going through the same dungeons. I'm glad this is something that Automata did better, and there it doesn't feel as tedious as it does here. I really think that if some more quality of life improvements were implemented, I'd be more inclined to complete more of the side quests and upgrade more weapons to their max level. It probably just comes down to personal taste, but if you enjoy it, more power to you. For full price, you are getting a full game, but you're going to be doing a lot of the same content. If that doesn't bother you, by all means, go for it. There's a lot to see and do in this world. If you're the kind of person who only wants to go through the story, I'd say wait for a price drop of around 40 to 30 bucks.
I'm very happy I got to experience Nier. It's a game that's going to stick with me for a very long time, but one I'm probably not going to go back to anytime soon. Hopefully we get to see more of this universe, because now that I have both Replicant and Automata under my belt, it's left me with this craving of wanting to see more. But unfortunately, we'll have to wait to see what Taro and his team comes up with, but I think it's safe to say, no matter what they give us, it'll be unlike anything we've experienced before. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a while since I've made a video like this, and I really wanted an excuse to do something like this again. Hopefully this video has convinced you to try out Nier Replicant, or maybe another Yoko Taro game in general. I really want to thank my friends who helped me with ideas, getting critique, while making this video, as well as a huge thank you to Shade16 for providing the thumbnail for this video. She did such an amazing job. I love it so much. If you want to check her out, I'll leave her info in the description below. Anyway, take care everyone, and hopefully I'll see you next time.